virtual screen.
Yeah, it's very clever.
Griffith.
Well, we're up to 40 people and it's a little past 1 minute past 7. So I think we can start. Are we ready? Okay. So welcome to the March evening program, the March 2021 evening program of the North Coast chapter of the California Native Plant Society, otherwise known as CNPS. We are one of 35 chapters of a statewide organization that brings together science, conservation, education, and horticulture to save native plants and their habitats. And I am Carol Ralph, currently president, one of many talented volunteers who keep our organization going. And you might have a chance to join us. A quick review of Zoom etiquette, since not everybody spends as much time doing Zoom as others of us. One, which it looks like everybody's being good at, is to stay muted unless you're going to speak to us. And I should mention that Andrea Taylor, whose name says she is California Native Plant Society, she's in control. So if you unmute when you're not supposed to, or start sneezing and you're not muted, she can take care of that. And she'll be taking care of chats and any of the tricks that come up. So when you want to say something, like to ask a question or to answer something, you can use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Put your pointer down there where it says chat. You click on that and it gives you a place you can write a message. Or if you think we can see you, raise your hand and wave it. Hi, Adam. He's got a cool background too. So you can have your video on or your video off. It's your choice. If you're feeling bashful or you don't have a fancy background. But our speakers sometimes like to see the faces, and I know the other people in the audience sometimes like to see your face as well as everybody else's. Just, you know, we're not in person, but if you can see their face, it makes it a little more personal. And you can turn off the camera when we start doing screen share, because then it doesn't matter. And this program is being recorded, and eventually will end up on our website, where there was a link that connects to a YouTube channel, and you can find it. You will be able to find it on the education tab of our website. Okay, and there are some of the past programs we've had on Zoom are posted there too. Okay, now I want to show you our Yes, I Would Like list. Okay, Andrea, I'm gonna screen share this one. There, our Yes, I Would Like. These are ways that you might want to participate with our chapter. And you can respond to these. If there's something you want to do, you can either make note of the person or contact that's given there and contact them directly. Or if it's simpler for you, you can do a chat and put your email address in there with what you want to do, and we'll take care of it from there. So if you want to be on our email list to get notified of activities, you can sign up on this groups IO. You go to this place and it'll let you sign up. Or if you want me to sign you up, you can write to me at this address. Then if you want to help propagate native plants and take care of them at our nursery and at freshwater farms, you can get on the list for those volunteers by writing to this email address that goes to our nursery manager, Chris Beresford, and to Barbara Reisman. And here's the advertisement. If you want to buy native plants, you can any day at the Neelan Glen Farm Stand, which is right there at Freshwater Farms. That's that address. Every day from 12 to noon. We have a stand, we have a plant stand at that farm stand with our plants on it, and she sells them for us, and we get most of the money from that. Then if you'd like to get some help thinking about what native plants to plant in your yard, you contact Melanie here, and at least 2 of our native plant consultants will come to see your place and tell you what native plants you already have, what invasive plants you have and should get rid of, and suggest native plants that you could plant. And generally, we just have a fun time talking about garden kind of stuff and plants. Then it's time to think ahead to the wildflower show. And we're doing it virtually again, a little bit different than last year, but it's going to be virtual. And the flowers will be on iNaturalist. So we need people to go out snapping pictures of flowers. And if you'd like to do that for us, you should contact Susan Penn at this address. Okay. And there's our all-important website address to find out things like, well, when does the wildflower show start? You better not go there quite yet. Larry hasn't got that web page up, but that's where it will be. All the information will be there. Also about the plant sale. Okay, I'll stop that share. There we are back again. And before we go farther, I'd like to ask whether anybody has seen any good plants lately. I bet somebody's been outside. You can either put them, if you want to tell us about something, you can write it in the chat and Andrea will read it to us, or you can raise your hand and unmute and tell us about it. L'Oreal.
Hey, the Humboldt Bay Wallflower is just looking gorgeous right now in the dunes. Many of them are up and just so bright, really pretty. And there, I also saw a cool Claytonia, little cute, icy pink gray Claytonia whose species I don't know.
Oh, like a teeny tiny miner's lettuce that's out in the dune and is kind of gray. Yeah.
I was thinking Claytonia, not Montia, but it could be Montia too.
I'm pretty sure that's a Montia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look it up. It's so gorgeous.
Yeah. And if you're looking at it on a sunny day, you can see its flowers, which are tiny and white. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Thanks.
So Andrea, did some chats come in?
Yeah. So people are seeing lots of fetid adder's tongues, also known as slink pods. Katrina said she's seeing Romanopsia tracei in Patrick's Point State Park. I believe those are mist maidens.
Oh, that's the rare one. Yeah, great.
Trilliums. Adam Cantor said he's seeing everywhere. And Gail and Bill said they're seeing the buckeyes leafing out.
Oh, they must be living down by Petrolia. Not too many buckeyes in our neighborhood up here in Arcata. Yeah, great. So it's wallflower time. And those of us who went to Gray's Falls, was that the weekend before last, can tell you that it's a great time to see Snow Queen. Even though there's not snow, it's just got that name, Snow Queen, but it's a cute little thing that looks like it might be in the saxifrage family, but it's actually a what used to be Scrophulariaceae, and it blooms very early. So spring is happening with those early things like the fetid adder's tongue and the wallflower. Anything else, Andrea?
Yeah, Evan said he saw some Howell's Montia.
Oh, good for him. out spotting the rare plants, the teeny tiny rare plants.
Let's see. And then more trillium sightings. One specifically was the Kirabashi trillium at Redwood Creek
Good.
and redwood violets.
Okay, good. Thanks everyone for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to proceed with some announcements. Our next field trip is Sunday, March 21st, and we're going to the Seawood Cape Preserve, which you might have read about in our newsletter, and you might have read about in the Sandpiper, the Audubon Society insert in the Eco News. Our field trip is filled. We had to limit the number on this one because of it being on another organization's property, and they have rules that they have to follow. But if you want to come, you can still respond to my email and tell me you want to be on the waiting list, because who knows, maybe it'll be a cold day and some people will stay home. But you'll be hearing more about the Seawood Cape Preserve in future years, I'm sure. They're working up towards being open to the public and even have a camping ground. And it's right along Patrick's Point Drive, north of Trinidad. So it's a nice coastal forest with an informal trail that goes out to Scotty Point at this point. Some of you might know that. Okay, and I'll mention for Katrina that there are some state parks work days coming up. I'm calling them work days. They're really just 3 hours of work. And the work is not all really hefty. They can find work for anybody. But on Saturday, March 13th, so this coming Saturday, they're working at Trinidad State Beach. That's often pulling ivy there. On the next Saturday, March 20th, they're working down at Sinkeoni Wilderness State Park. So you get an adventure going down there. And then the last Saturday in March, they're working at the Stagecoach Hill Azalea Management Area. And I bet by then you'll be able to find one azalea opening flowers. What do you think, Katrina? Will there be any flowers?
We saw one bush that was flowering there just at the end of February. So I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You can write to Katrina at Katrina with a K .Henderson at parks.ca.gov. And probably you could phone the park office and find out how to get in touch with her too. Okay. Then early alert on future events, because the first weekend of May is less than 2 months away. And the first weekend of May is our traditional date for the wildflower show and the spring plant sale. And the spring plant sale is coming right along, and it's going to be in person by appointment, which is the way we did the fall sale and our June sale last year. So we've got the procedures down, and you'll be able to sign up for an appointment by going to our website and clicking on the plant sale tab. And then the wildflower show, you're going to have to stay tuned for that and pay attention, because our artists group, the people who usually enjoy art night at the real wildflower show, have been dreaming up new ways to have fun wildflower art. So they're going to have little free art galleries, and they're going to have Zoom sessions to show you art, to show you how to do it and to share stuff. And they're going to share stuff on Facebook and Instagram. So if you have any art inclinations, be sure to pay attention. And that's going to start on April 2nd. So hopefully you'll be seeing something before then, telling you where to find the little free art gallery. Okay. And then the actual wildflower show collection and the showing the wildflowers, that's going to be on iNaturalist, which is a platform many people are familiar with, and the rest of us probably want to know how to use. And we'll be starting to put things there on April 24th, and then be adding to it for the whole week until Sunday, May 2nd. So it'll be a whole week of wildflowers. And we hope we'll see you there. Okay. Okay. Now, that's the end of announcements, unless, does anybody else have announcements that I've forgotten or didn't know about? Don't see anybody. Okay. So now I'm going to put on a different hat and introduce our speaker. Ready? So first, I'm going to tell you why we have Veronica here. It's because I was reading an application for a cannabis farm. It was their application to the county, and the landowner was following all the rules. You know, he knew what the rules were, and he was doing things on time and doing mitigations and that kind of thing. But from that document, I learned that current county rules that are intended to steer cannabis farms to existing farmland were actually steering cannabis farms onto native prairies. So the one I was reading, it was going to put up a whole bunch of greenhouses, and they were all carefully sited in the best parts of the native prairies around. And this is because of the rule about prime agricultural soils, which the county made. And the definition of prime agricultural soils is unclear enough or vague enough that when these owners of big rural properties went out, they could find prime agricultural soils in their prairies. So that's where they put their greenhouses. Well, when I learned that, I knew that we had to learn something about these prairies ourselves so that we could defend them. As a field trip chair, I know that we want our field trips love to go to prairies and open places, because that's where you have so many kinds of grasses and so many kinds of wildflowers. So we need to defend them. And that's why I decided we need to learn about prairies. And who knows about prairies? Well, I didn't have to ask far when I was reminded that the Mattole Restoration Council has been restoring prairies for some time. So I contacted our friend Veronica Yates, who brings plants from the Mattole Restoration Council's nursery to our plant sale, and asked if she would be able to give us a talk about prairies. And she said she could. And I'm thrilled that she's here tonight to do that. Veronica has been working with the Mattole Restoration Council since 2014, and she's had a number of different positions moving up the ladder. She knows how to use a shovel, and she knows how to get things organized, and she knows how to give a PowerPoint on a Zoom presentation. She can do it all. And I'll let her tell you more about what their organization does, but it's impressive, and I'm looking forward to her telling us about it. And Veronica will apologize that when she shares her screen, she's going to disappear. So just remember how friendly she looks. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Carol and the CNPS. I also want to apologize on behalf of Hugh, who was planning to join me this evening, but had something come up. And I assure you that even though he's not here to help me present, he did help me build the whole presentation, and of course is instrumental in all of the work we do. So huge thank you to Hugh. And then again, just reiterating what Carol says, I'm sorry you won't be able to see my face during the presentation. It turns out being a millennial does not mean that you're good at Zoom. So bear with me as I get through there. And with that, I will get shared here. Let's see. Okay, I'm hoping you can see my screen now. Okay. So thanks everybody for clicking all the various links and buttons and things to get you to this presentation tonight. And also thanks for being engaged about coastal prairies. I'm going to first discuss an overview of California coastal prairies. And I have to admit, this is going to really graze the surface of an in-depth and intricate ecosystem. So I'll kind of cover the values of these ecosystems. You can't get through the values without highlighting your favorite plants. So of course I have some pretty plant photos. I will also then go into the threats and the things that really threaten these types of areas. Then we'll sort of zoom in into our little home region here of the King Range National Conservation Area, which the Mattole Restoration Council, which I'm just going to call the MRC, not to be confused with Mendocino Redwood Company. And so the MRC has been working in this area for quite some years now. So two specific projects that we'll focus on are the Paradise Ridge Prairie Restoration Project and the Prosper Ridge Prairie Restoration Project. And don't forget to put your questions in the chat box. So this is a photograph looking east. The ocean's right behind me here, and Kuski Mountain is over to the left. You can just barely not see it out of view. And then way back in the distance are the Yola Boys back there. One of my favorite hikes. So the range spans from northern Santa Barbara up to southern Oregon, and is usually within 10 kilometers of the coast. There's a couple places over there in the Sacramento Delta region that have technically coastal prairie lands that aren't exactly on the ocean. And so these areas are incredibly disturbance dependent. Historically, the disturbance factor was indigenous burning. And, you know, obviously, as that was eliminated or reduced, we went into more of a settler regime. And after the elk were also pushed out, it was converted to sheep grazing and then cattle grazing later on. And because of this change in disturbance and some of the other threats we'll look at, these are one of the most threatened ecosystems in California. And there's varying stats around. I've seen that there's less than 5% remaining statewide. I've also seen different numbers, so I didn't want to give a stat without having a good citation for it. So they're just really, really dramatically reduced. Some of their values, as Carol mentioned, it's really nice to go on hikes in these places because they have a lot of wildflowers. They are incredibly biodiverse. I don't know if any of you have been watching the Klamath talks with Backcountry Press, but the specifically geology talk was really interesting to see the perspective of how young these areas are. It's the youngest piece of Earth on the planet in many ways. Don't quote me on that, I'm not positive about that, but they are very new, and I believe that lends to a lot of their biodiversity. These ecosystems have more than 75 endemic species, meaning that if coastal prairies were to disappear tomorrow, we would have 75 less species on the planet. So the habitat, this is just a super, super tiny list from a person that doesn't really think about animals that much. So, you know, this is just a smattering. The photograph over on the right is a sharp-shinned hawk in my backyard, which is adjacent to a prairie. I know he's in a tree over there. And so, yeah, these areas are significant, mainly because of their native perennial bunch grasses. And I also should note that there are prairies and there are grasslands. And so the differentiation between the two is semantics, in my opinion. So I will use the two terms interchangeably, but grasslands being more bunch grass dependent and prairies being more forb dependent. Technically, our coastal range is defined as a prairie, but again, I'll use it interchangeably. They do contain bunch grasses, and these are some really amazing plants. They have these super deep roots sometimes up to 25 feet deep, which just think about that for a second, 25 feet deep. It's really deep. So that allows them to sequester a lot of carbon, as well as store water, which enables water filtration as well and makes them really drought tolerant. Also, all that surface area is really good at preventing erosion. So the deep rootedness combined with the longevity really creates a stable and supportive coastal prairie environment. The picture on the bottom right is a Viola adunca, a western dog violet growing at the nursery. And these plants are pretty special because they are the only host for the Oregon silver spot butterfly, which is endangered. That is not a Oregon silver spot. That is a different pollinator. So yeah, this is Cape Mendocino reedgrass. And this bunch grass is, I often get asked the question of what is my favorite plant. And while it's impossible to answer, this is always my go-to answer. It's endemic to the King Range and Sinkyone State Park, meaning that it doesn't grow anywhere else. It's also the only endemic bunchgrass to Northern California. So if you find any other native bunchgrass, you'll find it all over California. So it's pretty special. This photograph is looking south towards King Peak, is sort of off of the frame, and then right in the back, that's Shubrick Peak. And this is one of our seed collection sites. Another couple little prairie cuties. This is an endangered or a CNPS threatened species, the Tracy's tar plant, and then the elegant rhodia. And then this is one of the prairie dwelling orchids. And if you've not seen this beauty, it's small and subtle and almost step-on-able until you really get an eye for it. And boy, is it special. So with that, we'll launch into threats. This is a coworker, and we are doing a pre-monitoring project to determine the density of the Douglas fir forest prior to treatment. So in other words, 30 years prior to this photograph, this was a big open prairie. So the threats are primarily, as I mentioned, fire suppression. Smokey the Bear showed up, said, hey guys, let's not burn anymore, it's bad. And so we did, we stopped burning, and that really has enabled the conifers to encroach in a severely massive way, as seen in this photo. Also development, so this includes housing development, it also includes agricultural and cannabis development, all types of development threaten prairies. It seems really exciting to look at a big open area of ground where you don't have to remove trees and you can just build things, but they are also functional ecosystems that need to be considered. So development is major. Also invasive species, and I'll discuss this a little more later, but one of our predominant invasives here is velvet grass. And because it's perennial, it has proven to be quite a bear to manage against. And other invasive species include tansy ragwort, Scotch brome, pampas grass, and on. It's long. So zooming in just a little bit to our King Range. Again, this is a similar photo looking at Kuski. This here is Johnny Jack Ridge. And I love this photo because it demonstrates really the fog effect on the prairies. Again, the ocean is behind me in this photo, and the fog is just creeping up Kuski Creek over there on the right and just pillowing over Johnny Jack. It's really nice. So here's a map over here on the right. And so this is the Mattole, is this gonna work? Yeah, so this is the Mattole River here. And so all of the Mattole Restoration Council work is focused within the Mattole watershed and the surrounding King Range. And so in 1970, the King Range National Conservation Area was dubbed the first national conservation area in the country. It was slated to be part of Highway 1, but because of the intensive geography and topography, the highway makers were forced to move inland. And so this area is also dubbed the Lost Coast, as I'm sure most of you know. The area is 68,000 acres, and it gets a tremendous amount of rain, some of the most rain in the country. And this all plays a factor. So zooming into the Mattole watershed, here's a map showing the loss of grassland in the last 50 years. So this is around 1950 over here. And you can see specifically up here, this is mid-valley. There's quite a lot of more grasslands over here. Also down in the lower river area. It's really shocking how quickly this change has progressed. So what is the MRC doing about it? Well, we've been, this is a photo of the nursery and our recently planted seed farm. We have been advocating for this watershed and working to protect habitats and promote salmonid habitat since 1983. We started even before that as a little group of conglomerates within the Mattole. And so we've been here quite a while. In the early 2000s, we really created a great partnership that has been fostered over the years with the Bureau of Land Management. And they've really enabled us to develop this ecosystem restoration program, and more specifically, the native grasslands enhancement projects. So with that comes the native plant nursery, which is where we store all of our seed, we process all of our seed, we propagate up to 50,000 plants a year, and then we outplant these plants on our restoration projects out in the King Range and Mattole watershed. Also with that partnership comes a lot of invasive species removal, because with all of these restoration techniques, you have to have multi-facets. You can't just attack it from one perspective. So Paradise Ridge, let's see if I can go back to this map here. So Paradise Ridge is located near Shelter Cove and near the headwaters of the Mattole. So I'm gonna mess it up a little bit, I'm sure, but it's down, oops. Uh-oh. So it's down in this area. So that project really was birthed in 2006 and went on until 2014. The goals were to restore the prairie habitat by replanting with native bunch grasses. And I should back up, you can see on the map that there was a fire in this area, a wildfire in this area. And so it began as a way to sort of rehabilitate and try to encourage native recruitment. And so the other conditions of the site, you can see there's a lot of conifer on the edges of the prairie there, but there hadn't been encroachment all the way up to the ridge top there where the road is. And so partly it's because it's really steep there. It's really steep terrain. It's also very rocky. And so most of the other grassland type is annual. And so one of the interesting things about revegetating an annual grassland is that the competition is lower and the cycling of the plants is much different. And so when we propagated more than 125,000 plants over that 8-year span, they really did quite successfully. They were able to get established, they were able to grow and get large and create these massive stands of perennial bunch grasses, which feels really successful. They haven't had a lot of recruitment, and hopefully they will start introducing more baby bunch grasses, but just the fact that they're able to survive and get established, we feel really successful about. So here's a nice video of Paradise Ridge. You can see our bunch grasses all down there. And our planting style was very much unit based. So you can see there a boundary of one of our units where a species change. And then there's the rest of the King Range. Paradise is truly beautiful, and I recommend giving it a look if you get a chance. So now we'll switch over to Prosper Ridge. And let's see, I'll go back here and show you where that is. So Prosper Ridge is way up here near the mouth of the Mattole. It's the ridge just to the south of the mouth of the Mattole. And so here's another map showing you the very stark change in vegetation. This photo is from 1942 up here. Well, the top left is 1942, and then it goes to 1967. And you can see the firs really are marching in. And then by the 80s, down in the bottom left, the entire ridgetop is almost entirely fir. It's really invaded quite a bit. And so the bottom right photo, you can see some of our restoration projects where we have taken excavators and removed the vegetation and piled it in an attempt to turn it back to prairie. Here's a drone photograph taken by Hugh last fall. And this demonstrates our most recent work up on Prosper Ridge. There are some different challenges with this site. So some of the different challenges were the velvet grass, which I alluded to earlier. And because it's a perennial, it's been very challenging to get the same rate of establishment as Paradise Ridge. And so the site also had a slightly different factor, especially with the fir, right? I mean, there's always encroached Douglas fir that we need to remove. So the goal was to remove those encroaching fir up to the entire project site is 800 acres. Not all of that is Douglas fir. And so to restore that, we would remove it, then we would replant and seed with native species. And then the critical component, of course, is maintenance with fire. And so to date, we've planted over 120,000 native plugs. And for this project, we've also tried to focus on forbs and not just grass plugs, because as more research and restoration comes out, it's more and more evident that that complementary planting style is really critical to build a functional ecosystem. So native plugs include flowers now these days. We've seeded 50 acres and we've removed 350 acres of Douglas fir. In a perfect world, those two numbers would be the same. And so we go up and monitor these sites regularly and try to get an idea of how well they're doing. And, you know, without going into too much detail, they're doing okay. Plugs are really give the plants a step up compared to seeding, and it seems like a really useful way to get plants established. So this is a basic calendar, if you will, of our various projects. So the first step is removing the vegetation, getting that out of there, piling up these Douglas fir. It takes a really big excavator, and then it takes a nice dozer or something to make it nice and clear and get all the stems out. Another veg type that we're dealing with on Prosper Ridge is coyote brush. And so that can be sort of seen in that photo as well. Then we also do a lot of seed collections. All of our plant materials are locally sourced, and that's really important for genetic viability. So in the bottom left, you can see one of our seed collection sites, and there's a tiny little person on a cliff side. Next step is propagating plants at the nursery. So this is June grass growing at the nursery. And then next we revegetate. So also planting is the common word for this. And so plants will get planted on 18-inch centers, and this is to sort of help them colonize and form a patch. And then finally is monitoring. And so this is a typical monitoring day down in the corner. Here's a video of some of our planters from this past January, or time lapse, I should say. These tools are called hodads. And these guys are some of the best planters in the West, if you ask me. And yeah, what an incredible view and workspace. So you can see it's not incredibly perfect. There's still some sticks left in the ground, and you know, there's always that cost benefit analysis of like how much energy can we put into the earth before it stops being as feasible for us. And we want to cover as much ground as we can and really try to push that fur line back and maintain our space. And so, you know, you always have to make decisions. And so this photo, I think, really just sums up what we need more of and what is so critical to keeping these prairie systems functional and healthy. And this is, you know, fire. So it was on Prosper Ridge this past year, so January, I believe. So yeah, that was a really quick introduction to prairies, and I really could go into so much more detail about why they're important, but mostly it's their diversity and their fragility. They're being lost to the fur, basically, in our area. So yeah, I would love to hear lots of questions, and yeah, thank you so much for being here. And also thank you to all of our funders and supporters and partners. Let's see here.
Whoops,
Okay.
there you are. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So, Andrea, do you have a pile of questions?
I do. Let's see. Mark and Melinda Bailey asked that if fire keeps coastal prairies from being encroached on by Doug fir, is there an ecosystem that is linked directly to the Native American management?
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty fair to say. I mean, I can't say that definitively, but it does seem, yeah, because it's so disturbance dependent, and elk have had a small impact, but they can't have the same level of impact as fire. And also, you know, fire happens naturally as well, but it does seem that, yeah, a hand is helpful.
In the Mattole watershed and the Kings Range, do you see a lot of lightning strikes? Or do you think it was mainly Native Americans managing the land?
That's a good question. To my knowledge, we have less lightning strikes than our surrounding areas, such as the Trinities, which really get a lot of lightning. Yeah, we don't get quite as much, and when we do get it, it tends to be offshore.
Griff Griffith said, thanks for your awesome work. He's very grateful, and he asked if any badgers have been found on the North Coast grasslands.
I want to see badgers. I drive down Prosper Ridge every day and hope that I see a badger. And one day I even excitedly showed up and showed my coworker this video that I had taken that was surely of a badger, and it was of a skunk. I was just so excited. I was blinded. So I have yet to see one, but I see their holes all the time.
Gail and Bill Eastwood are curious if you could explain the methods for velvet grass eradication.
Yeah, so as of now, we don't have any. We hope that the cows are doing their best and grazing specifically on the velvet grasses, but I haven't gotten my cow whispering skills attuned yet. So we are still looking for viable options, and I'm open to ideas.
You know if anyone in the Mattole area has tried cutting Douglas fir, burning or removing it, and then following up on planting to see how the seed bank responds? Or sorry, without a follow-up planting, to see how the native seed bank responds?
Interestingly, I do. So a neighbor of mine up on Prosper has done a project of this, not of the scale, but he did a small fir removal, piled, burned, didn't do any planting, was intending to plant, but never quite got there. And then found a really huge recruitment of Elamus glaucus, and which is blue wild rye. And so we were all sort of curious about that because it was enough of a pocket that it would have been hard to imagine that seed being brought in by wind. So it suggests that the seed bank was present.
Can you tell us how to access Paradise Ridge? Is it BLM roads?
Yeah, so it's a BLM road between Shelter Cove and Whitethorn. There's a turnoff that goes up into Paradise Ridge.
Sandra is wondering, what are some of the native bunch grasses and how can we get reliable native seeds for these?
That's a great question. And I meant to include a species list, but it didn't quite make it in there. So, well, I'll go from my head because they're all in there. So we have two kinds of fescue. There's the California fescue and the Idaho fescue. We also have those two calamagrostis, the one being the endemic Cape Mendocino and the other being Pacific reedgrass, which is like a really big grass that probably most of us have seen before. And then we have California oatgrass, which is Xanthonia, and that's really is very specific to coastal prairies and is an indicator of these ecosystems. And that's just a small list. I could keep going. And in terms of finding good seed distributors, definitely check locally. I think going locally is so important. And so I have turned people away because I'm like, you live in the Central Valley, you should really look closer to yourself in order for all the wildlife and pollinators and genetics and everything is just better that way, right? So if you live near me, you should give me a call and see if I have seed for you. We sell native seed of bunchgrass and forbs. If you don't live near me, I would check out PC Seed in the Central Valley or SNS Seeds, Larner Seeds, or just to name a few.
William wanted to know, does velvet grass have a below ground structure that allows it to persist, and does just pulling out the grass get rid of it?
Sorry, can you say again, does it have a what structure?
A below ground structure that allows it to persist?
Yeah, so it's not fully rhizomatous, I don't think. But yes, it does have a big mat, an underground mat that is very difficult to remove. And so just pulling it isn't quite sufficient enough.
Adam Cantor wants to know if you have a favorite prairie on the Lost Coast or in California.
That's a good question. I think the one, I had several photos of it, but I think the HJ, which is this ridge south of Prosper, is one of my favorite, mostly because of accessibility for me and remoteness and native plant populations.
L'Oreal's asking, how's the bear grass doing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of amazing and beautiful bear grass upriver, like near Paradise Ridge. There's some, and especially near King Peak, there's like some amazing patches. I'm really sad that down in the lower valley, we don't have any bear grass that I know of. And if anybody else knows of any, please let me know. But yeah, it's one that I have to love from afar, unfortunately.
Okay, forgive me if I butcher these names, but where was the Hemizonia and the Tricholia photos taken?
That was taken north of Kuski Creek on the Lost Coast, but on the unnamed ridge north of Kuski Creek.
And then Sandra's asking about grasses that could be sown in Del Norte County and Palawa Dunes. Would you be able to sell seed for those plants in that area?
Certainly, yeah. And in terms of species to recommend, I'd have to take a closer look, but Pacific reed grass is usually a dune species or nearby.
Robert's asking if there are any efforts to make fire easier as a tool to utilize. Is there any places it'd be a best option, or is it just very difficult to implement and deploy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are lots of efforts happening, and I think the catastrophic wildfire years we've been having have really, sounds horrible and cliche, but I have to say it, they fueled the fire for fire management techniques. So the Humboldt County Prescribed Burn Association is really incredible and have been assembling a lot of groups to try to facilitate more burning and to train people and get large scale burns to happen. And so I super advocate for that group. And also, you know, here locally, we've been doing our best to get as much fire on the ground as we can. There are clearly a lot of regulations and careful permitting and such that we have to go through, and so we're doing our best to get managing that way as much as possible.
And lastly, Karen wants to know, what are the forbs that you plant with the grass plug?
Yeah, so we have a whole seed assemblage. Some species that we've seen do incredibly well are the California poppy, of course, the subspecies Maritima, but that species particularly does super well post burn. So we've been really utilizing that seed for our burn piles. Also, yarrow is a good rhizomatous spreader. And one of our favorites is blue-eyed grass. And so that gets grown in plugs and planted. Also, we look regionally and we try to match what's growing nearby. And so we have goldenrod and yeah, I guess goldenrod.
Do you know which goldenrod that would be?
I would like a second opinion because I've been told it's spathulata or spathiofolium, but I sort of disagree. It's short usually and compact and little.
well, like the one in the dunes, that description fits, so maybe it is.
Okay.
So I have another question. A couple of years ago in the magazine that Cal IPSI sends, the California Invasive Plant Council, they had an article that was called an interview with a guy who restored what they called zombie ecosystems, and it was talking about grasslands. And he said that well, he did not subscribe to the way of just getting rid of everything that was there and then planting what you want, you know, just spraying it or plowing it or whatever. His way of doing it was to very carefully study what you had and locate the remaining little patches of the good stuff of the native bunch grasses, and also to test the soil for different minerals. And then, because he said that your native grasses, yes, they're tough once they're established, but they need to have a rich soil to germinate and get started. So what he would do then was to use his weed eater to weed eat out the things he didn't want around the places where there were the good grasses. So instead of doing the whole field at once, he'd just focus on the places where there were good grasses, and then over the years, weed eat a larger and larger area to get a larger a larger patch without the bad grasses, and then he'd add the right minerals and fertilizers to get the soil appropriate so that when the good grass dropped seed, those seedlings could sprout. Anyhow, have you heard anybody talking about that?
That is a really interesting idea, and I'm happy you brought this up because so we've done soil testing post vegetation removal, but pre-planting, and as to be expected, these areas are really acidified and the soils are really devoid of nutrients, and that could be one factor of our bunch grass establishment success. And so yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, these areas have been Douglas fir for 30 years, and so they've really don't have the same nutrients as a prairie anymore. And so in order to reconvert, I think that there's a place to try to understand the underground life as much as the above ground life. Yeah, I don't know of anybody that's specifically tried that method, but I feel like that it would be a very meticulous but effective way to support those. Yeah.
Yeah, so what you need is a plant that you can sow or plant easily on a big scale that will reverse some of the changes of the Douglas fir to the soil, that will move the soil as fast as you can back to being a prairie soil.
Yeah, I think you're right. A combination of plants and maybe mycorrhizal or microbiota. Yeah.
I guess there's lots to learn.
Yes, fire. I'm watching the chat stream by.
Is there anybody here from the California Native Grassland Association? Did you work with them at all, Veronica, or find any information on their website? Or
Definitely. Andrea Williams has been out to give a talk in Petrolia before, and so I've worked with them a little bit and have definitely gained a lot of information from the website and their publications. Yeah, and I definitely highly, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Emily Allen said she's with that association, Carol.
okay, Emily, do you want to tell us anything about your organization?
Let's see. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
Okay,
see you
yeah.
too.
Hey, yeah, I'm a board member with CNGA, and I would do the workshops for them. And this is a great presentation. Thank you so much, Veronica. It's always fun to see grasslands across the state. Yeah, we work on a lot of different ways with native grasses. So we work on conservation, on restoration, education, a lot of different fields. So it's great to see so many people appreciating them.
So, well, through our nursery work and encouraging people to do native plant gardening, we find ourselves saying, well, what you need here is a native prairie. Can a person come to your website and find out how to establish something like a native prairie, or what basic species they should be putting in?
Yeah, we try not to overgeneralize too much because every area in California is very different. What works in the North Coast may not work in the Central Coast. What works on the coast doesn't work inland. So we try to be very specific about what we're saying, but there is a lot of resources on our website. And I'm also working on, Sonoma State has a coastal prairie website that I'm working on transferring because they no longer want to host that. So hopefully we'll have that up and running soon, and that also has a lot specific to coastal prairies with restoration information as well.
How about native grass maintenance information?
There's some of that. It's again really specific to species, so a lot of its maintenance will depend on what species you have on site specifically and where. But generalized information, yes.
Okay. Does your organization have people who like to give Zoom presentations to native plant groups?
We do. We're all a little bit strapped right now, but we do like to give presentations. And if people are interested in seeing if someone's able to talk, please let us know and we'll see if someone's available.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
That's great. We're glad you're there.
Thanks.
So any more questions out there for Veronica or for Emily? Well, we'll thank our speakers. Yay.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So Bill Pinnix just asked, how does he get a hold of you to buy seeds? Great
question. And it was on my last slide, but I didn't get to linger there very long. So you can email me. My email is veronica@mattole.org. Okay, we know where to find you. Yeah, and I also will have little seed packets available at the plant sale, at the CNPS plant sale in May. Great. And I suppose people can come find you at your nursery in Petrolia. Yes, definitely. We do not have regular business hours, so do get in touch with me, but I would love to show you around. And I always, yeah, it's great to have other plant people around. So please come by. Yeah. And the drive from Ferndale to Petrolia is really beautiful, especially like in May. You drive through a lot of, yeah. Yeah, it's a botanical journey in its own.
All the checker blooms are blooming.
Oh, nice. Already.
In May. Yeah, right when you bust out to the first prairie.
Nice.
Yeah, the view.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add about prairies or Wiyot tribe or?
I just think they're one of our most special and biodiverse habitat types that that we need to lobby more for their protection, and surprisingly we don't really have many prairies. The Lost Coast and the King Range is kind of an exception, but many of our prairies are in private ownership, and a lot of these threats are kind of happening unchecked, and we are losing prairies to conifer encroachment. And the tribes definitely, we're the creators and the masters and of these prairies. And we need to get them back on the land, practicing their ancient skills of cultural burning. That's what I'd say.
Thank you, Adam.
Absolutely.
It seems like we have to get people wanting to maintain their prairies. We're not going to be able to legislate this, but if people want to maintain their prairies as prairies, we're more likely to get there. So we have to show them what a good prairie looks like and tell them how they can get from what they have to a good one. That's where the Mattole Restoration Council has been learning a lot.
And always have more to learn.
Okay. Anybody else out there have stories about prairie restoration? Not yet. Well, maybe by next year. We'll get more people trying it.
The Calamagrostis is a great genus to plant. So I think that's a good place for folks to start.
I know where I am on the coast, velvet grass is one of the two species that pops up and just sort of erases any progress you make. And the other one is the sweet vernal grass, anthoxanthum. It's just like the land wants to be anthoxanthum. It won't stay dune plants or anything else I want.
Yeah, I will say something that I've noticed in my own yard. I moved here, and then I've sort of escalated in my awareness of plants. And so, just last year I was gardening and realized that a large portion of my yard was Xanthonia californica. And I think that would probably be the case of a lot of Mattoleans. I think we have a lot of native plants that just need to be observed to be appreciated.
Well, that's fun.
I know, it was fun.
Yeah. So I guess we also need to provide people with a good way to learn some of the grasses so that they know what they're looking at. I guess I'd encourage people, even before you know any names for them, just look at grasses, because you can tell them apart. Velvet grass does have velvety leaves, and it's got the flowers that are kind of purpley at first, and then they turn straw colored. And you can learn to tell them apart. Just give them your own names until you find somebody who can tell you what the rest of the world calls them. And CMPS does sell a set of mats. They call it a poster, but it's a set of 4 mats that have grasses on them. And it's got native grasses on some mats, and it's got non-native grasses also, because it's important to know the non-native ones, because they're not labeled out there, and you're going to be finding lots of the non-native ones. So if you make it to one of our sales, you'll be able to buy the grass posters there, or you can order them from the state CMPS. And do Emily or Veronica have a favorite field guide, or how do you recommend people learn their grasses?
Yeah, I do have a favorite field guide. It's called California Native Grasses, I think, and it's published by UC Berkeley Cooperative Extension, I think. But really the key way for me, I'm a visual person, it was just walking and IDing and doing seed collection. And that's really, I think, for me, the only way is to just really get into the little tiny parts and spend a lot of time with them. But yeah, I would say lots of observation and a friend, a good botanist friend, which I can be to you. Just email me.
Yeah, there's also a great book that came out recently. It's more for Northern California and Oregon by the Carrick's Working Group out of Oregon. And it's the California and Northern Oregon grasses. And it's amazing photography close up of grass parts. So it's really helpful. It's not inclusive of all species, and they might have some different names from what we use here with the Jepson name system. But it's a really fantastic new resource.
And I guess you mentioned the extension service, Veronica. What really gave me a good grounding on the grasses was since we have some farmland, I could ask the grass expert from the local extension office to come look at my pasture grasses with me. So I walked around to this guy who knew the grasses, and I'd pick it, he'd name it, and I'd put a sticker on it to keep practicing it later. So that established, about 20 different species. They were all non-native, but those are sort of my baseline grasses, and I can relate to all those common ones. So call on your guys at the extension office, see if you can get them out in the field. And CMPS will try to have a grass field trip. It would be nice if we could have a bunch of them, but we'll work on that. Okay, well, I think I'll thank Veronica for zooming in all the way from Petrolia, way down there south of Cape Mendocino, where they have buckeye trees. Yeah. Thanks for a wonderful talk, Veronica. And we'll look forward to seeing you the 1st and 2nd of May at the plant sale.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you too. And thanks so much for having me, and of course for everything you all do.
Okay. Now we'll hope to see everybody else at the plant sale too, in small doses, because you have to have your appointment. Okay. Thank you, Andrea, for running the chat and keeping us organized. Good night, everybody.